A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
We are diving straight into the deep end today because the map of the world is being redrawn in real time right outside our window. It is March 15th, 2026, and the geopolitical theories we have discussed for years are no longer academic exercises. They are being written in fire and steel. Today's prompt from Daniel is a heavy one. He is asking us to analyze the emergence of what he calls a post-negotiation geopolitical order. Specifically, he is looking at the joint operations between the United States and Israel, and asking us to define this new world order where the goal is no longer containing or talking to extremist regimes, but actively dismantling them.
Herman Poppleberry here, and corn. This is the topic I have been obsessing over since the reports started coming in earlier this month. We are moving past the era of strategic patience. For 20 years, the prevailing wisdom in the West was that if you just provided enough diplomatic off-ramps and economic incentives, even the most radical actors would eventually choose stability over chaos. The idea was that everyone is a rational actor at heart, but as of March 2026, that theory is officially in the graveyard. What we are seeing now is the birth of the Decapitation Doctrine. It is a fundamental shift in how a superpower and its primary regional ally view the concept of security.
It is a heavy term, but it fits the reality. When you look at the kinetic activity over the last few weeks, it is clear the United States and Israel are no longer waiting for permission from the broader international community to act. They are the primary architects of a security framework that treats certain regimes as fundamentally incompatible with global stability. Daniel wants us to stratify the world based on this alignment, and I think we should start with what we might call the Kinetic Core. This is the engine room of the new order.
The Kinetic Core is the heart of this entire shift. It is the United States and Israel acting in a high-speed, integrated loop. In previous decades, you had intelligence sharing, sure, but there were layers of bureaucracy and political hesitation. Now, the sensor-to-shooter cycle is almost instantaneous. We saw this in the strikes on the Iranian oil infrastructure just 10 days ago. This was not a warning shot. This was a systematic removal of 40% of the export capacity controlled by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps within a 72-hour window. The level of coordination required to hit those specific nodes without causing a total environmental catastrophe or a global price collapse is staggering. It shows a level of technical and tactical maturity that the old containment model never even dreamed of.
And that is a massive departure from the old sanctions-heavy approach. We talked about this a bit in episode 1009 when we looked at the concept of financial decapitation. Back then, we were looking at cutting off bank accounts and freezing assets in London or New York. Now, the coalition is physically removing the infrastructure that generates the wealth in the first place. It is the difference between taking someone's wallet and dismantling the factory where they make their money. Herman, why do you think the negotiation model failed so spectacularly to account for the internal logic of a group like the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps?
It comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of ideological rigidity. Western diplomats often project their own pragmatism onto their adversaries. They assume everyone has a price or a point where they will choose the survival of the state over the pursuit of a revolutionary ideal. But for the leadership in Tehran, the revolutionary ideal is the point of the state. When the United States and Israel realized that no amount of talk would change that core mission, the strategy shifted from trying to change their minds to simply taking away their tools. This is the post-negotiation reality. You do not negotiate with an entity that views negotiation as a tactical delay. You simply degrade their capability until they are no longer a factor on the board.
It is like trying to negotiate with a computer virus. You do not ask the virus to please stop encrypting your files, you format the drive. But this format the drive approach creates a very clear line in the sand for every other country. If you are not in the Kinetic Core, you are either in the diplomatic buffer or you are a targeted regime. The diplomatic buffer is where most of Western Europe currently resides. They're still talking about de-escalation while the missiles are already in the air. It is a strange, almost surreal position to be in. They are watching the world change and trying to use the vocabulary of 1995 to describe it.
That buffer is getting thinner by the day. Countries like France or Germany are finding it increasingly difficult to maintain a middle ground. They want the stability that the United States-Israel coalition provides, but they are terrified of the hard power realism required to achieve it. However, if you look at the operational reality, even these buffer states are benefiting from the intelligence harvested by the core. They might condemn the strikes in a press release, but their security services are quietly asking for the data on the new threats being neutralized. It is a parasitic relationship in some ways. They get the safety without having to sign the mission orders.
It is a bit hypocritical, but that is the nature of the buffer. Now, Daniel's prompt asks us to identify the ideological partners who might not be in the Kinetic Core yet, but are gravitating toward it. I think the most fascinating example right now is Azerbaijan. We did a deep dive on this in episode 1133, but the situation has evolved even since then. The Caspian Shield Protocol is no longer a secret. We are seeing integrated drone surveillance where Israeli assets and Azeri assets are operating under a unified command structure on Iran's northern border. This is not just a border patrol, it is a forward-deployed sensor network that feeds directly into the Kinetic Core.
Azerbaijan is the northern anchor of this entire strategy. They have realized that their own national survival depends on the neutralization of the Iranian threat. And because they are willing to provide the geography and the logistical support, they have moved from being a peripheral player to a foundational partner. This is a key part of the stratification. You have the core, then you have the foundational partners like Azerbaijan, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. These are the countries that have decided that the old status quo was a slow-motion suicide pact. They are choosing the Decapitation Doctrine because it offers a definitive end to the threat rather than a managed decline.
You also have to look at the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. Their integration into this coalition has gone far beyond the initial scope of the Abraham Accords. We are talking about joint naval patrols in the Persian Gulf that are specifically designed to interdict the smuggling of missile components. This is a hard power integration. It is not just about opening embassies or trading dates and technology anymore. It is about creating a regional shield that makes the old Iranian way of doing business impossible. When you have an Israeli-made radar system and the Emirates feeding data to a United States carrier group, the old lines of sovereignty are being rewritten in favor of functional security.
What is interesting is how this coalition handles the vacuum. That is always the big critique of the dismantle approach, right? If you break the regime, what fills the space? But look at the current situation in Syria. We are seeing the al-Shara administration in Damascus moving toward a buffer zone model. They have seen what happens to regimes that remain tethered to the Iranian axis, and they are choosing a different path out of sheer self-preservation. The coalition is not just destroying, it is creating a set of incentives where the only way to survive is to decouple from the extremist elements. It is a brutal form of evolution, but it is effective.
It is effective because it is based on a realistic assessment of power. If the cost of being an Iranian proxy is the physical destruction of your command and control, the market for proxies starts to dry up pretty fast. I want to push on this idea of the ideological filter. Think about a country like Greece or even India. They are not traditionally part of a Middle Eastern security bloc, but they are increasingly aligned with the United States-Israel core. Why is that? Is it just about energy? Or is there something deeper in the ideological alignment?
For Greece, it is about energy security and the Mediterranean. They see the coalition as the only force capable of keeping the sea lanes open and preventing the kind of maritime chaos that a desperate regime might try to trigger. But for India, it is even deeper. They have a massive stake in the stability of the Middle East because of their diaspora and their energy needs. But more importantly, India has its own long-standing struggle with extremist ideologies. They see the Decapitation Doctrine as a potential blueprint for how to handle threats on their own borders. They are watching the precision of the March 2026 strikes and realizing that the technology has finally caught up to the strategic necessity.
It is almost like the coalition is providing a service. If you're a nation that wants to participate in the global economy and you are tired of being held hostage by non-state actors or radical regimes, you look at what the United States and Israel are doing and you see a path forward. It is a return to hard power realism, but with 21st century technology. The precision we are seeing now is what makes this possible. In the past, regime change meant massive ground invasions and years of nation building. Now, it is about surgical strikes on the economic and military nervous system. You do not need to occupy a country if you can disable its ability to project malice.
The technical shift is the real enabler here. We are talking about real-time target acquisition in non-permissive environments that would have been impossible 5 years ago. The intelligence sharing protocols between the United States and Israel have reached a level of transparency where they are essentially operating a single, distributed brain. When an Iranian commander turns on a satellite phone in a bunker in the desert, that signal is processed, verified, and assigned a kinetic solution in minutes. That level of dominance makes negotiation feel like a relic of a slower, less capable age. Why would you wait 6 months for a diplomatic response when you can solve the problem in 6 minutes?
And that is the part that the traditional diplomatic establishment in Washington and Brussels just cannot wrap their heads around. They are still operating on a timeline of months and years. They think in terms of summits and communiques. The coalition is operating on a timeline of seconds and minutes. If you can neutralize a threat before the diplomats have even finished their first round of coffee, the incentive to negotiate vanishes. Why compromise with a threat that you can simply delete? It sounds harsh, but in the context of global security, it is a massive efficiency gain.
It sounds cold, but from a strategic perspective, it solves the problem of the bad faith actor. For decades, regimes have used negotiations as a shield to buy time while they continued their nuclear programs or their proxy funding. They learned that as long as they were talking, the West would not strike. By removing the negotiation phase, the coalition removes that shield. It forces the regime into a state of permanent vulnerability. The March 2026 strikes were the ultimate proof of concept. The Iranian leadership was waiting for the usual round of condemnations and United Nations resolutions. Instead, they got a physical dismantling of their primary revenue stream. They were playing a game of chess while the coalition was playing a game of delete.
I think we need to talk about the second-order effects of this. If the United States and Israel are the kinetic architects, what does that mean for the global energy market? We saw a temporary spike when the strikes happened, but it stabilized remarkably quickly. That suggests the markets have already priced in the end of the Iranian oil era. They are looking to the new infrastructure being built by the coalition partners instead. This is where the economic side of the doctrine comes in.
The energy map is shifting toward the Eastern Mediterranean and the Caspian. This is why the alliance with Azerbaijan and the cooperation with Greece and Cyprus is so critical. We are seeing the construction of a redundant energy corridor that completely bypasses the traditional choke points that Iran used to threaten. This is the economic side of the Decapitation Doctrine. You do not just hit the regime's oil, you build a new pipe that makes their oil irrelevant even if they could get it out of the ground. It is a total spectrum approach. It is military, it is economic, and it is ideological.
Daniel's prompt mentions that the United States and Israel share an ideological conviction that these regimes must be dismantled. That is the part that scares the old-school realists. They think ideology makes you move in unpredictable ways. They prefer the cold, calculated balance of power. But in this case, the ideology is actually providing the clarity that was missing during the containment years. The goal is clear, the end of the revolutionary regime model. It is not about land or resources. It is about the fundamental legitimacy of a state that uses terror as its primary export.
And that clarity is infectious. When other countries see that the coalition is serious and that they have the technical means to back it up, they start to align. We are seeing a silent alignment from countries you might not expect. There are certain Mediterranean partners who are providing port access and logistics while officially remaining neutral. They want to be on the winning side of the new order, but they do not want the political headache of announcing it yet. They are waiting for the kinetic core to finish the heavy lifting before they step out into the light.
It is the ultimate case of actions speaking louder than words. The coalition does not need a formal treaty if they have operational dominance. The treaty is the reality on the ground. Herman, what do you think the biggest risk is here? Can this coalition maintain this level of intensity without the broad support of the traditional Western institutions like the United Nations? We are seeing a lot of pushback from the General Assembly, even if the Security Council is paralyzed.
The risk is overextension, but not in the way people think. It is not about military overextension. The United States and Israel have the hardware. It is about the administrative vacuum. If you dismantle the IRGC's control over the Iranian economy, who manages the transition for 80 million people? The coalition is very good at the kinetic part, but the post-kinetic phase is where things get fuzzy. We saw a glimpse of this in Syria recently. The buffer zone works, but it requires a level of constant management that is taxing. You cannot just blow things up and walk away. You have to manage the resulting chaos.
But maybe the answer is that the coalition is not interested in nation building this time. Maybe the goal is just to reduce the threat to a level where it can no longer project power outside its borders, and then let the internal dynamics of the country take over. If you take away the regime's ability to pay its enforcers and its proxies, the regime will eventually collapse from within. It is decapitation by 1,000 cuts, some of them kinetic and some of them financial. It is a more hands-off approach to regime change.
That seems to be the play. It is a more modest goal than the old neoconservative dreams of the early 2000s, but it is more realistic. You are not trying to build a Jeffersonian democracy in the middle of a desert. You are just trying to make sure the guys in charge do not have the money or the missiles to blow up your allies or your oil tankers. It is a security-first doctrine. It prioritizes the safety of the global system over the internal governance of a specific state.
Which brings us to the practical takeaways for our listeners. If you are looking at the world right now and trying to figure out where things are going, you have to watch the coalition indicators. Do not listen to the speeches at the United Nations. Look for increased joint intelligence data sharing. Look at the energy infrastructure integration. If you see a new pipeline or a new fiber optic cable being laid between a coalition partner and the core, that is the new map being drawn. That is where the real power is flowing.
Also, watch the shift from soft power to hard power as the primary currency. In 2026, a nation's influence is no longer measured by how many treaties it has signed or how much foreign aid it gives, but by how much it contributes to the integrated security shield. If you are Greece and you are providing a critical naval base for the coalition, your seat at the table is much more secure than if you were just another voice in a committee in Brussels. Hard power is the only currency that is currently trading at a premium.
Hard power realism is back, and it is powered by high-speed silicon and precision-guided munitions. It is a world where the speed of your decision-making determines your sovereignty. If you can keep up with the United States, Israel kinetic loop, you are part of the core. If you cannot, you are just a spectator or a target. It is a binary world, and the middle ground is disappearing.
One thing I find wild is how this has changed the internal politics of the coalition members too. In Israel, there is a sense of purpose that we have not seen in a long time. They are no longer just reacting to threats, they are proactively shaping the region. They have moved from a defensive crouch to an offensive sprint. And in the United States, despite the political noise, the operational side of the military and intelligence community is fully committed to this new doctrine. They have seen that it works, and they are not going back to the old way of doing things. The success of the March strikes has silenced a lot of the critics in the Pentagon.
It is a fundamental shift in the operating system of global security. We are moving from a system based on permission to a system based on capability. If you have the capability to remove a threat, and you have the ideological conviction that the threat is illegitimate, you act. The era of asking for a consensus before you stop a missile from being built is over. The consensus is now formed by the action itself.
And for the targeted regimes, the message is clear. Your old tactics of delay and deception are no longer effective. The coalition is not listening to your speeches. They are watching your telemetry. They are not reading your diplomatic notes. They are reading your encrypted communications. The transparency of the modern battlefield has made the old games of shadows impossible to win. If you move a missile, they see it. If you transfer funds, they track it. There is nowhere left to hide.
It is a tough world, but in a weird way it is a more honest one. There is less room for the kind of diplomatic theater that allows problems to fester for decades. You are either contributing to stability, or you are an obstacle to it. The Decapitation Doctrine does not leave much room for ambiguity. It is a clear-eyed, if brutal, assessment of what it takes to maintain order in a world of high-tech threats.
I think we are going to look back at March 2026 as the turning point. The strikes on the oil infrastructure and the formalization of the Caspian Shield were the moments when the post-negotiation order became a reality. It is not a theory anymore. It is a set of coordinates and a series of mission logs. We are living in the aftermath of the old order, and the new one is still cooling from the heat of the strikes.
Well, that is a lot to chew on. Daniel certainly knows how to pick a topic that gets the gears turning. We have covered the kinetic core, the diplomatic buffer, and the new energy map. We have looked at why the old negotiation model failed, and what the new hard power realism looks like in practice. It is a lot to process, but it is essential if you want to understand the headlines over the next 6 months.
It is a fascinating and, frankly, necessary shift. The world is too fast, and the threats are too lethal for the old ways of doing things. Seeing this level of cooperation between the United States and Israel is a testament to the shared reality they are facing. They have realized that they are the only ones willing to do the hard work of dismantling these threats, and they are doing it with a level of precision that was once science fiction.
Before we wrap up, we have to give a huge thanks to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the show running smoothly while we go down these rabbit holes. And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the show and allow us to process all this data. We are running a lot of simulations to keep up with these geopolitical shifts, and that compute power is vital.
If you are finding these deep dives useful, the best thing you can do is leave us a review on your podcast app. It really does help other people find the show and join the conversation. We love seeing the community grow, especially when the topics are this complex.
You can also find us at myweirdprompts.com for the full archive and all the ways to subscribe. We have over 1,100 episodes now, including the ones we mentioned today, like episode 1009 on financial decapitation and episode 1133 on the Azerbaijan alliance. Those are great companion pieces to today's discussion, if you want to get into the technical weeds.
This has been My Weird Prompts. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.
See ya.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the close from sloth, from man, from long-eared host. My Weird Prompts, until next time, stay curious, keep weird.